Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you into the darkest corners of the human mind. This is a special collection, 15 chilling short horror stories, each one crafted to leave a mark on your imagination. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let the stories begin. Whispers beneath the bed. I could say I was having a pretty peaceful life. I just graduated high school. I was about to enter college in a week, to which my mom, Lena, was really proud of because I decided to pursue something great for my life instead of just applying for McDonald's or something. Anyway, everything was going along pretty normal. Until one day, I overheard my mom talking to someone through the phone. "Who was that, Mom?" I asked because she looked sorry for something, like a friend had a problem and she was feeling sorry for her. "Oh, just our old neighbor. Remember that house we lived in many years back? He said the family that moved after us just left yesterday." My brows just furrowed, since I couldn't recall living in a house other than this one. Then my mom softly laughed and patted my back. "You probably don't remember because you were too little." "Really? Why did we move away?" "We moved because of you, honey." She chuckled as she waved it off with her hand. "You kept on bugging me about some monsters or whatever. To be honest, we wouldn't have left there if your aunt didn't offer this house for only half the price. A lot cheaper, and you kept on complaining back there anyway, so I just agreed to move." I just nodded in understanding, though I still couldn't recall what she was saying. Eventually, I just let it go and continued with my business, making sure my papers were complete, packing my stuff that I'd surely need. You know, the usual things to prepare before you move away and enter a new part of your life. The next day, I guess I could say boredom and curiosity just attacked me out of nowhere, and the idea of visiting that old house crossed my mind. I asked my mom, and I was actually surprised when I found out it was just a 15-minute drive away. You guessed it right, I did go to the house. And as soon as I stood there in front of the empty driveway, the memories started flooding back like a light switch was flipped open. And I did remember the little me complaining about something almost every day during breakfast. But I just laughed it off, thinking that it was probably just my wild imagination as a kid. I carefully approached the door, just in case someone was still in there. Even though Lena said the family moved out and the house is probably empty by now. I tried to open the door, not really expecting it to be open, so I was surprised when it did open. Maybe I'm just lucky, yeah. Anyway, the house still had a lot of furniture around, and I actually remember myself doing childish stuff on them, like jumping on the sofa or scribbling on the cabinets. I could only chuckle as the memories flashed by my eyes like I was watching a movie. Eventually, I found my way to my old room, and my small bed was still there in a corner. Like all these years, it has never been moved the other way. The tiny amused smile on my face faded away as I started to remember what I was fussing about while we still lived here. I kept on complaining about a monster under my bed. Every night before I'd sleep, Lena would check and assure me that nothing was under there. But as soon as the lights were off and she was gone, I'd start to feel those long, slow scratchings right against the wood under my bed. I could even feel it vibrating through the mattress, and a thick blanket I wrapped myself with in fear. Eventually, I'd fall asleep despite the incredible fear, and wake up the next morning crying. As I stood there at the doorway, this new surge of curiosity flowed right through me. I don't know, that monster under the bed was probably just the usual stuff kids tend to imagine, but I wanted to fulfill this silly curiosity. So, why not? I walked closer to the bed and took deep breaths. For some reason, being near it sent an eerie sensation up my back, but I tried to shake it away. With one heave, I lifted the whole bed and propped it against the wall. I was ready to laugh at myself for doing that for nothing, but horror washed all that away as I saw long, deep scratches against the wood. There were just so many, to the point that some parts of the wood were already too thin and could break with just a single poke. I couldn't believe it. Gasping, I scrambled out of the room and out of the house. I was about to enter my car when an elderly woman from next door called out to me. "May I help you?" she said with narrowed eyes. Darn, she probably thought I was stealing something from the house. Wiping the sweat off my face, I awkwardly approached her. I used to live here. I was just checking out what's new. I half expected that she wouldn't believe me, but then her eyes widened as if she recognized me. Oh, are you that little Superman kid? She made awkward little gestures that looked like dancing. The one that always danced like this in the backyard. It was funny how the embarrassment was able to wash away the horror in a blink. Yeah, I remember that. Why, yeah. Oh my gosh, you've grown so much. Mrs. Whitaker said, all teary-eyed, and hugged me tight. Then started mumbling things like she and Lena were friends and they always came over. Only when she mentioned about a call that I realized she was the one Lena was talking to yesterday. Did you decide to visit because I called yesterday? I glanced at the house, but this time, fear crept inside my heart instead of nostalgia. Yes, sort of. You said the family just moved out of here. Yeah, they were such a nice family, she said sadly as she followed my gaze. Too bad they had to move away. Why did they move away? Quite silly, actually. She chuckled, but the sorry look remained on her face. But I guess they're just ready to do anything for their kids. The mom told me that their youngest daughter won't stop whining over something for months. It stressed the parents so much, and even their older daughter. They had to endure the little one's whining. But then I guess they eventually got tired of it and decided to move away. The same eerie feeling started to crawl up my spine once again. But I pushed on my curiosity and asked another question. But boy, little did I know that I'd only regret that I ever asked that. What was the girl whining about? Mrs. Whitaker paused for a bit, as if to try to remember, but quickly returned her attention to me with a smile. You know, just some usual children's stuff. Someone scratching under her bed or something. Whispers in the dark. As I'm typing this, I'm trying to be as calm as possible. As calm as possible. I am hoping to God it cannot read what I am writing. I have acquired a new friend. He is a very nice one. He stays with me all the time. He stays with me everywhere. He terrifies me. Nothing I do can get it off my back. It started around a month back. Rachel and I had gone to Daya. It isn't very far from where we are, but it takes quite some time. Their area is divided into two places, Old Daya and New Daya. A month ago, Rachel and I landed in New Daya with hopes to have a few days in the beach and enjoy the waters. It wasn't a particularly smart decision, seeing that the humidity made it really difficult to as much as breathe in normal air. It was hotter than in here, but I think we enjoyed the nights. It was cool. That's the thing about being with Rachel. When we came together, every dumb idea started seeming like the smartest idea in the world. We were there for a week. On the fourth day of our visit, we decided to, very dumbly, walk from Old Daya to New Daya. It is quite the distance, and the path we chose was quite secluded and hadn't been used for quite some time after a new and clean path had been constructed for easy travel by car. Due to this reason, an overgrowth of trees surrounded the path, and the path in itself was full of shrubberies and creepers. We two sisters walked from there, without any heed to the numerous dangers we could have in. There could have been burglars, psychopaths, animals, things, but we, being the foolish sisters that we were, decided to walk the path and call it an experience. We decided that we were the strongest people on Earth, and we could tackle whatever came our way. Do you know what our only weapon was? It was a flashlight. So with an extensive Chuck Norris-like attitude, we had set off down the dark road, guided by our flashlights. Keeping a positive mentality, and sure enough, we didn't encounter any ungodly things till at least midway. Halfway through the road, we came across this awkward smallish structure on the side of a road. My immediate thought was it could be an elaborate doghouse. It was made of a reddish stone and had carvings around a tall, at least according to the height of the structure, domed doorway. Its conical roof came till our thighs, and it seemed to be a pretty interesting structure. Rachel, I made a stop there, and I stooped and looked inside it. Obviously, the inside was dark, and even though I shone the flashlight in it, I saw only darkness, maybe a few creepers to add to it. Deeming the structure nothing unusual, we set back in our path. I think it was then that it all started. As we walked, I heard footsteps behind us, very hushed footsteps, like someone was trying to sneak behind us. I had turned back, but obviously there was nothing, only a slight breeze. Rachel heard it next, and she told me about it. We called out in the darkness behind us. Nothing. Obviously, we got slightly scared there because it was then that the possibility of rogue psychopaths finding refuge there had occurred to us. I still can't fathom how it didn't occur to us right in the beginning. We kept hearing the footsteps, which by the end had turned into a hushed slithering throughout the rest of the path. And it only stopped when the woods ended and we were in New Daya. Do you know what we did all the while we kept hearing the muffled footsteps? We ignored it. The rest of our stay was uneventful, and after we came back, almost a week had passed. It started off somewhere in the middle of the night. I couldn't tell what time it was, but I kept hearing a slithering in the room. I wasn't the squeaky and easily scared kind of girl, so I flipped on the switch and looked around in the room for snakes or any holes they might have escaped into. Nothing. I dismissed it and went back to sleep. The next night when I heard the slithering, I flipped on my torch light to check the room. I checked the whole room and was just going back to sleep when something odd caught my eye. My desk was directly in front of me and the chair was pushed into it neatly. The desk was placed in a way so that when I sat on the desk, I had my back facing the bed. From beside the chair, I saw a weird glint. At first I thought that it might be something metallic, which is until it moved, and very deliberately so. At this point I was scared. I calmly got off my bed, pretending I didn't see it, and left my room. I went straight to Rachel's bedroom, woke her up, and told her what I saw. At first, she was skeptical, naturally, but then she decided to check my bedroom for me. When she did, there was nothing under my desk or anywhere in that matter. The next night, I awoke to a peculiar whining. Creepy as it was, it didn't stop me from turning on the flashlight. This time the light fell directly on its torso, and my heart jumped to my mouth. There was a creature in the room with me, and as soon as the light fell on it, it slithered towards me, slowly but surely. At this point, I was paralyzed, mouth agape, and horror-struck eyes. I never really got a good look at it, since as it got closer, the light concentrated on a smaller part of it. But its torso looked like it was veiled, or maybe it was made of liquid smoke, I don't know. It slithered closer and closer, blocking out the light from my flashlight. And I felt something very close to my face. It wasn't a breath, but I remember being terrified beyond imagination. It was very, very close to my face, and it whispered only one thing. In the creepiest sound I have heard till now. Friends. I'm sure that is what I heard before I passed out. You would think it had stopped coming to my vision, but no. It comes to me every night. It creeps on me when I'm working with my back to the bed. I sometimes feel like it's lying next to me in the dark while I lay quietly paralyzed with fear. When I had tried to tell Rachel about it, it created a distraction in the kitchen and very fleetingly showed itself. I knew I was to stay quiet. I couldn't talk about it. This has been going on for a month now. I think it thinks it is my friend, but it terrifies me beyond anything. I don't know how to get rid of it. It really terrifies me. I don't want it around. I know I can't talk about it, but I'm hoping to God it cannot read. It act lied ost. I'd ivu 8 F7. I read. I know. Kill. I everybody. Kill. Friend. Read. Whispers behind the door. When I was little, I always had an overactive imagination, had frequent nightmares, and always thought I saw things going on during the night. I told my mom that every night, as I was trying to get to sleep, my bedroom door would shake. Not very obviously, but just slightly. I always slept with my door slightly ajar, and outside of my door, I had my own staircase because my bedroom was in the attic. I would lay in my bed and just watch the door kind of vibrate and shake really quickly. I'd go and tell her, and she would come up to my room and have a look for herself. Only every time she did, the door would have stopped shaking. It irritated the hell out of me, and I was determined to prove to her that I wasn't lying. Each night, As soon as it started to shake, I would sprint down the stairs and tell my mom to come quick. It didn't matter how quickly I did it. The door would always stop by the time she got there, as if it was trying to anger me. In the end, I gave up. If the door wanted to shake, then it could go ahead. I tried my best to block it out, but I couldn't. It got to the point where I would dread going to bed because of the stupid door. I would examine it during the day to see if there was something causing the shaking, but I could see nothing that stood out. It was a complete mystery. One night, after many weeks of hellishly annoying shaking, the door began to shake more vigorously. I was laid in bed with my covers pulled up almost over my eyes, scared stiff. Through the slight gap in the door where the hinges were, I could see something moving on the other side. I told myself it was my dog, but I knew that was ridiculous. My dog was white, whereas this thing seemed to resemble smoke. I would have run downstairs for my mom, but that would mean I would have to pass whatever was on the other side of the door. The next day, I told her about it, and she just put it down to my imagination or me being tired. I was tired, that was true. I was tired because of the stupid door. The next night, I watched the door again, and sure enough, I could see the smoke through the gap. I decided to take action into my own hands, and I bought a scarecrow to put at the other side of my door. The scarecrow would scare away whatever was messing around outside of my bedroom. Scare was in the name. It was foolproof. I felt more relaxed knowing the scarecrow was outside, and for once I thought I was going to get a good night's sleep. No such luck. I was just dozing off when I heard a weird, shuffling noise and then a gentle thud. I jerked wide awake, feeling my heart drop when I saw that the door was shaking again. I could no longer see the reassuring shape of the scarecrow on the other side of the door, and I realized that it must have been moved. The thud had been the scarecrow hitting the floor outside of my room, and now the smoke was back. I was in complete despair. If the scarecrow didn't work, then nothing would. I tried explaining this to my mom, and she actually seemed to believe me for the first time. She must have seen how concerned I was. Also, I was almost falling asleep at school due to lack of sleep. The whole thing had spiraled out of control. We didn't own a camera back then, but I did have a karaoke machine. Mom came up with the idea that we should put the machine outside of my room and set it to record. So even if we couldn't see whatever it was that was outside of my room, at least we would possibly be able to hear it. It was better than nothing. This plan had to be foolproof. Of course not. The next day, when we checked the recording, we found that it was completely blank. We had definitely set it to record, so whatever it was behind the door had obviously turned off the machine. I felt like I was going mad. At first, the thing had just been annoying and inconvenience. Now I was beginning to feel threatened. How long would it be until the thing opened the door and entered my room? If it was capable of knocking over the scarecrow, turning off the machine, and shaking the door, then surely it was capable of opening it. And when it did open the door, what would it do to me? What did it want? Every day from then on, all I could think about was the fact that I didn't want to go to bed. I was sleep deprived and felt like the energy was being sucked out of me more and more each day, or each night. My mom expressed her concern to my Nana, who, being religious, gave me a rosary to hold as I slept. My mom usually rejected religion point blank, but in this case, she agreed and said that it was worth a try. That scared me more than ever. My own family thought I was in danger. Mom had said numerous times that I could sleep in her room with her in order to try and get a good night's sleep, but I refused. I was almost 12 years old, and sleeping in her room would mean that I had let this thing win. As scared as I wasn't going to let whatever it was take over my life any more than it already had. The rosary didn't work. Nothing worked. My mom, the biggest skeptic in the world, even began burning sage around the house to try and cleanse it. My Nana encouraged me to pray every night, and I did, despite never having quite believed in God. I prayed that whatever was on the other side of the door would go away, or that if it wouldn't go away, that it would at least stay out of my room and not hurt me. Things got worse and worse. My school had called my mom several times expressing their concern. I had lost weight, I had dark circles under my eyes, and I barely ever participated in class. They wondered if I was having problems at home. They had called me into the office to ask if everything was okay, and each time I would say that it was. I could hardly tell my teachers that my bedroom door was shaking and the smoke behind it was driving me mad. One day, I completely broke down. I told my mom that we had to move out. I couldn't keep living like this. She actually looked like she was considering it. I wasn't the happy, bubbly girl that I had been just a few short months ago anymore. I was miserable, nervous, and was struggling just to eat a meal without wanting to throw it all back up. Then one night, it all stopped. Just like that. The door didn't shake. The smoke wasn't there. That almost scared me more, because that meant it was somewhere else. In my room? I didn't sleep for that whole night, and when I told my mom and Nana about it the next day, my Nana suggested that we get a priest in to look at the house and possibly bless it. My mom suggested that we wait a few nights, and I agreed. The next night, nothing. The night after that, nothing. 3 weeks later, nothing. The thing on the other side of the door had disappeared without a trace. I slowly but surely began to sleep again. I began to enjoy school again, and finally I was eating normally. I became the girl that I used to be again. My Nana swears it was the rosary and my prayers that drove the thing away, but I disagree. I think that it left because it had taken what it had needed from me. It had pushed me to breaking point and couldn't possibly take anything else from me. So it simply moved on. I have no idea where it went or why it came to me in the first place. This all happened around 10 years ago, and I no longer live at home. I haven't seen anything of a sort since I broke down and the thing left. I still keep my Nana's rosary hung in my room, and my scarecrow still sits outside of my door. My mom regularly burns sage, and my Nana still prays. Even though none of those things had worked, they keep us reassured. We don't know why that thing chose me, or if it will ever come back. All we can do is hope with all of our might that it doesn't. The White-Eyed Boy of Marlowe Chapel. Going back, I remember it all vividly. My first time at Marlowe Chapel with a couple of my friends. Nobody was really scared. After all, the sightings were hoaxes and never supported with actual evidence. But being Halloween, something was bound to happen. And something happened indeed, because that night was the start of a string of the most horrifying ones in my existence. We arrived at the chapel, cracking jokes about the myths that were told about it while walking around aimlessly, not in search of anything specific. After about 5 minutes in our journey, I saw in the midst of the churchyard an all-white figure. From what I could tell, he was near the age of 10 and had no eyes, just black pits where his eyes should have been. I looked at my friends for reassurance that this wasn't just my imagination. This was real. They told me they could see him too, but just vaguely. As he was about a football field away, it was hard to tell what we were looking at. So, naturally, we strained to get a better look at him. The four of us started to walk slowly toward him, not particularly looking to hurt him in any sort of way. Once we reached a certain point, I instantly felt a sort of connection with him. I was the only one he looked at, considering he had black pits for eyes. The others could see him looking at me intently, and we decided to leave, afraid. We got back in the car and waited about 5 minutes before leaving, just to see if anything would happen. Nothing did, but the minute my head hit the pillow that night is when things did start to happen. That first night, Halloween 2014, I had a dream about him, the boy from the chapel. It was all a recap from that night, except everyone's teeth were rotted out and or had cavities. These dreams occurred each night for 8 days. Within each dream, he would get about 10 yards closer, and the dream would always cut off just as I closed the car door. After 8 nights, the dream had occurred 8 times consecutively, and he was about 20 yards away from me. So we went back to Marlowe Chapel. The dream stopped after that visit. January 8th, 2015. I've been staying in my grandma's that week, as my bathroom was being renovated. I was on the couch, where I had been sleeping. This night had started as an otherwise normal one. I was casually browsing my Facebook and listening to a podcast with one earbud in. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but then the lights and TV went out and I heard scratching from the basement. It started coming up the stairs and gradually got louder and louder until I thought I was going to lose it. Then abruptly silence. I looked up toward the stairway door to see what it was, but saw nothing. Questioning it, I turned back, and I got a glance down the main hallway where I saw a streak of white. Terrified, I was hesitant to look back, but I seemed drawn to it. So I looked despite my gut feeling, and there he was, the boy without eyes. He stood there with intent but lack of emotion for at least 20 minutes, and then he disappeared. Or so I'd thought. I looked outside my window, and there he was, hanging from the barren tree. I thought I was going insane, hallucinating. My brother claimed to not be able to see him, so why could I? I snapped a picture of the tree from inside, sending it to the group chat I was in. Nobody saw anything except what they thought was snow, but I knew it was him. Gathering up my courage and going against my own gut, I went outside to take a different picture, this time with the flash on. I only cracked open the door to do so, as I didn't want to leave the comfort of the house, no matter if he could get inside. This time, he was sitting in the tree rather than hanging for a noose. That was what struck me as extremely odd. I took the picture despite his changed position and rushed inside, sending it to my group chat again. This time they could see him. He stood out against the snow as a lighter, blurrier white. After this, I felt compelled to go back outside and face him, ask him what he wanted from me. So, once again, I gathered up my courage and went back into the freezing winter night. I looked up at him in the tree and yelled, "What do you want from me?" 10 seconds of silence filled the chilly air. And then, "Please come back." The weeping figure. Early one autumn morning, when the chill of the bitter New England air bit my lungs and skin through all the layers my mother forced me to wear, the girl next door and I made the long walk through our densely forested neighborhood to the bus stop. She, blonde, 1 year my junior, sustained a sunny one-sided conversation about the promise and potential the 6th grade held. I, dreading another day of middle school and unaware of how much worse high school would prove by comparison, did not have the heart to contradict or disillusion her. Instead, I let my mind and gaze wander, lighting on the frozen plants by the roadside and the memories of a lost summer that seemed ossified inside them. We trudged on, breaking frost-limbed leaves underfoot. The road curved around a copse of balding trees, and I peered through their browning foliage as we passed. As Lila chatted away, I felt a stab of gloom, infinitely sharper than the general discontentment of beginning the school day, and it seemed as if the color drained from the world around me. That was when I spied a figure deep in the midst of the trees. He sat with his legs pulled tightly into his chest, pressing his hairless head into his knees, which obscured his face. His posture seemed one of intense despair. Despite the cold, he wore only a white t-shirt and a pair of ragged blue jeans. I could see his bare, pallid feet protruding from their fraying cuffs. He remained absolutely still, although he undoubtedly heard Lila and me coming down the street. I had never seen him or anyone like him before, and in our isolated neighborhood, where everyone knew everybody else for lack of other companionship, that was a rarity. I alerted Lila, pointing out the man in the trees. After some searching, she spotted him too. The moment she laid eyes on him, complete reticence supplanted her cheery disposition. It was as if all the happiness had been sucked out of her. "I don't like how I feel," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm scared." Her eyes began to water. I was about to tell her that I also felt uneasy, but stopped short as I noticed that a saline sting began to well up under my eyes as well. The autumnal colors around me blurred and faded. Blinking them back into focus, I found that they had become utterly achromatic. The trees and leaves around the copse had turned black and white. I tried to relay this finding to Lila, but the words caught in my throat, for the blonde had drained from her hair, leaving only a bleached white. "I'm scared too," I said, my voice weaker than I expected. The two of us ran down the road, all the way to the bus stop. The frigid air pricked our lungs, but the pain of catching our breath in such chill air was nothing in comparison to the relief we felt. I looked around and saw green lawns, orange leaves, blue skies. Lila's hair glistened gold again, although we had several minutes to pass until the bus arrived. Neither of us spoke about what we had witnessed. In our shared silence, I ruminated over the curious spectacle of the weeping figure. What exactly had I seen? My first thought was that he had drawn all the life and color out of the area around him. But that sounded absurd. Who had ever heard of such a thing happening? My rational side took over from there. Nobody ever heard of such a thing because such things did not happen. I must have imagined it because the sight of the man must have spooked me. Then a pang of conscience struck me. We had seen a man in the woods, likely in distress, possibly ill or lost or homeless. Neither of us had offered to help him. What if he were in trouble? We could not afford to leave him there alone. All this I relayed to Lila. Despite some misgivings, she agreed. We dashed back to where we had seen the weeping figure, worried that he might have frozen to death in the meantime. When we arrived, however, he had disappeared. Not even his imprint remained in the icy leaves on which he sat. Although our own footprints from our brief pause by the trees stood out clearly in the frost. Otherwise, no prints led to or from the cops, whose dull brown hue had returned in our absence. In the many years since that initial sighting, neither of us have glimpsed the weeping figure. Lila barely remembers if I ask her on the rare occasions I see her these days. Sometimes she wonders whether it was something I made up, a trick of the mind that startled me so fiercely as to frighten her too. It is as good a guess as any. Sometimes, though, I will take a walk through the neighborhood of my youth when I go to visit my parents for a holiday. Without warning, I will be overcome by a sadness so intense that it drives me to my knees, and the tears and sobs flow freely. I will see the skin on my hands grow paler, and the world around me will be devoid of color, grim and without promise. It will take every ounce of my resolve to stand up and flee, to run until the colors and the will to live return. I suspect in those moments that the weeping figure is still out there, somewhere, hiding in my periphery, following me. I find it far less scary than the more likely explanations. The Shroud Phantom. I can pinpoint multiple times my younger brother has gave me a good jump. Yet the best scares I have ever received had to come from my older sister. Before we moved away from our childhood home in New Jersey, my sister had to watch my younger brother and I on some nights while our parents were out. My brother, being very young at the time, fell asleep early-ish. I did not really like to go to bed when I was younger, so I would cause the most problems. My sister would counteract this by locking me in my room and turning off the flow of electricity into that room. I, being a 7-8-year-old kid afraid of the dark, would bang like a lunatic trying to get out of the darkness. After a couple minutes, she would put a blanket over herself and finally unlock the door. I would come flying out of the room, only to be faced with a monster of some sort. The thing that creeped me out the most about this monster was that it was concealed under a blanket. There are millions of possibilities of what this creature could look like underneath it. After a couple minutes of her attacking me with this blanket and myself screaming bloody murder, she would eventually take the blanket off and tell me to go to bed. I would always be emotionally and physically drained, so after a few seconds I would pass out. She did this only about 3 to 4 times. Since my parents started to go out less and less as time went on. The scariest time this happened, though, was on a Saturday evening. My parents had to take my younger brother to the hospital for unknown reasons at the time. I was playing video games, so I barely made out what my mom said when she went out the door. Be back soon. Stay out of trouble. Samantha will be home. I heard a noise come from the adjacent room of mine. It was my sister's room, which was one place in the house I was not allowed to go into. It sounded like a door was opening, but I debunked it as her going through the closet because her room door was shut. An hour went by, and I was getting really loud and obnoxious with this game I was playing. The door to my sister's room opened, and I knew that she was going to put me to bed. Suddenly, my heart sank because the room went dark. I let out a cry of anger and fear. All the progress I made on that game was gone, and I knew it happened over another stupid joke of my sister. The door slammed shut, and I was covered in complete darkness. I started to bang like usual. I really wished I just went to bed or hid. The door flew open, and there it stood. The one thing that scared me as a kid, the Shroud Phantom. Something was different about it this time, though. It stood in the hallway, much taller than how Samantha normally was. It let out this weird, groaning noise, which made me almost piss my pants. The creature inched closer to me as I started to step back. I must have tripped on one of my controllers, because I fell backwards and hit my head on something. The final things I remembered in that moment was the front door opening and the blanket falling to reveal nothing was there. Samantha approached me and must have thought I passed out, because she tucked me in. I thought for the longest years that someone came to the door and my sister stopped the fun to check who it was. After 3 years of living in that house, we moved away to the south. I am currently 16, so it has been a while since my sister has tried to scare me with that corny routine. My past self was too stupid to realize it was a facade. I remember a couple days ago, my sister and I were talking about the whole blanket monster thing. I still can't believe you were afraid of a blanket. It was not the blanket. It was what I pictured under the blanket, you ass. You got me really good that one time when Noah went to the hospital. What are you talking about? I was at a friend's house when Mom told me to come home and watch you. What? That's not true. I pissed you off with too much noise, so you screwed with me like always. Come on, stop fucking with me. Ethan, I have no idea what you were talking about. You were actually starting to scare me. To save both of us from losing our minds over this, I lied and pretended that I was trying to scare her. I have a look of fear and dread every time I look at that blanket. Sometimes I hear the noises at night, like something is being dragged. I shrug it off and fall asleep. Unfortunately, I have been sick for the past couple of days, so I've been losing my mind with cabin fever. The family went to see a movie, so I'm currently alone. That's odd. I just heard a door open. They can't be home this early. They just left 2 hours ago. Shit, the power just went out. It's not even storming out here. I have to go get some flashlights. I hate the dark. The shadow upstairs. My basement has never exactly been a welcoming place. It's unfurnished. There's no carpet, and the walls consist of boring, exposed bricks. There's a set of old wooden stairs on one end that creaks whenever anyone uses them. Behind the stairs is a storage area that begins about 4 or 5 feet off the ground and goes maybe 15 feet further back underneath the garage. The place is a dump, as my brother Jacob never cleans it, and toys and tools and random things are sprawled out across the entire basement floor. And that's an accomplishment considering how huge it is. It's not very wide, but from one end to the other, it's at least 80 feet in length, including the storage space. However, it is not easy to see from one end to the other, since the water heater, furnace, and other appliances sit conveniently at the bottom of the stairs to make it impossible to carry large objects like the Christmas tree up and downstairs. Anyways, one night we had some friends over. By we, I mean me and my parents. They had a little girl with them, maybe 4 or 5 years old, and since my brother was elsewhere, as usual, I wound up sort of babysitting this girl while the parents chatted over desserts or something. Since the basement had so many toys, I thought it was a good idea to take her downstairs to play. Upstairs was kind of boring for a kid her age. The first thing she did when she got down, there was find a large box. We had just replaced our washing machine, so its ginormous box was just sitting in the middle of the basement floor. It was as if I had completely vanished as soon as she crawled into the box. She had entered her own little world, playing house or something. I tuned out for a while to check emails on my iPod while she entertained herself, and then she caught my attention. "Who's that?" she asked. I blinked. "Who's who?" I responded, confused. "That man over there, the man in black," she responded, completely straight-faced. "There's no one there," I told her. "That's because he went upstairs," she told me. At this point, I took the girl, Emily, upstairs and sat with my parents for the rest of the evening, not saying a word about what she said. 2 years later, I had some friends over in mid-February. In Wisconsin, this means that if you were to go outside at night, you would be frozen solid in under 10 minutes. So me and my friend were stuck inside and went downstairs to investigate the haunted basement I told them about, the above story. In fact, there were 5 of us, including me and my cousin Noah. I had a tape recorder to collect audio. Noah had a digital camera, and the others were armed with flashlights because they wanted to turn off the lights reluctantly. So we pulled the strings to turn off the lights, and we sat there in the pitch-black basement, but only for a few seconds. A halogen light bulb began to flicker above my head almost immediately. I reached up to find that it was halfway plugged in, but still a coincidence. I hadn't even turned on the recorder yet. So I unplugged the light and turned on my recorder and tell Noah to do the same to his camera. It was past 11 o'clock at night, so it was silent. Absolutely silent. Several minutes passed. We even did that thing they do on TV where you just ask questions to whoever or whatever. There wasn't a single response. So it turned into a bit of a joke. We started making fun of the situation and felt pretty stupid. We laughed for a while. Finally, Noah's camera gives a low battery warning. So we decide to take the last few minutes seriously. Okay, I'm going to count down from 3 and then let's have it quiet again. Noah says, 3, 2, 1. A few silent moments passed. Noah's camera beeps and shuts off. I turn off my recorder. We go upstairs to listen to the footage, and that was that. Of course, the footage was rather uneventful. We listened to the entire tape, and for the longest time we heard nothing but the sounds of our own voices. Until the end. Okay, I'm going to count down from 3, and then let's have it quiet again. Noah says, 3, 2, 1. A few silent moments passed. Noah's camera beeps and shuts off. But then in the half second between the camera turning off and the end of the footage is a whisper. Don't leave. We all stared at each other, petrified. Who's that? One of my friends asked. The man in black. I told him. The Mourning Lady of Willow Lane. I never believed my friend Mark until I experienced it myself. You see, Mark had told me this outrageous story about an entity he refers to as the Mourning Lady that has been haunting him since he was young. I didn't believe a word of it. Not because I don't believe in the paranormal per se, but because the details seemed more like something from a Hollywood horror flick than something you hear about happening in real life. Mark would see this woman in and around the apartment complex that his family owned. He lived with his mom in the manager's apartment, and at one point my fiancé and I decided to take up residence in a unit at the other end because we wanted to move into town closer to our family, and the apartment was notorious for being the cheapest place around and not doing credit checks. Mark told me about the Mourning Lady many times, describing her as a younger woman approximately late teens to early 20s, but with a haggard appearance. Her dark hair hung to where it covered portions of her face at any given time, so he could never look at her completely head-on. He described her skin as being an ashen color, and her clothing a simple drab-colored dress that looked worn out. These features led him to call her the Mourning Lady because of her grayscale appearance. We moved in during the spring. The place was already spooky enough considering the other residents were all creepy in their own ways. There were approximately 10 units total that sat side by side in this one-story building. The section of the building that Mark lived in was up closer to the road in a brick portion of the building that housed 6 of the units. The other 4 units were at the end we lived on, a section that had obviously been an add-on later in the building's history as it was made out of metal siding rather than brick, and the apartments were a bit newer. According to the locals, the brick part of the building had been a dentist's office from early on until sometime in the 1980s, which explained the unorthodox floor plans and the need for an addition to make room for more units. Mark's family lived in what was once the main lobby. Across from the building lay a small pond, and the entire property was backed by sprawling crop fields, as was a common sight in this part of the South and in this small one-stoplight town in particular. My first indication that things were a little off in this place was the stain. Mark's mom had hired some locals to paint and clean the apartment before we moved in. but I noticed what looked like a spot of mold on the wall of the bathroom in between the toilet and the sink with its old-fashioned medicine cabinet. Upon my asking, they sent out the maintenance worker who tested the spot, checked the adjacent neighbor's wall, and even went as far as to cut into the wall because he suspected a leaking pipe had grown mold inside the wall. When he cut the wall open, there was nothing on the other side. They replaced the section of drywall, and it held up until the following week when I noticed the stain had reappeared in the same spot. We decided to ignore the stain after that, chalking it up to some weird occurrence that wasn't really a major concern. Then, our pets began acting up. One morning, we awoke to a loud wailing scream from outside our bedroom. It sounded like a baby, but at this point we hadn't even had our son yet. At the same time, my fiancé Liam ran to the door. Our younger cat came bolting into our room, terrified and shaking. Our other cat was nowhere to be found, and eventually we did find him beneath the couch, but he wouldn't come out at all. We had no idea where the scream came from, and ascertained that it must have been the cat getting spooked by something, a mouse perhaps. We knew the noise wasn't another tenant, because it had definitely come from our apartment. Fast forward to a few months later in the fall. I was in the middle of coming inside from hanging the laundry out to dry in the back. We had a communal clothesline as the building had no washer/dryer outlets, and the families who could not afford the laundromat often hand-washed their clothes, as I was doing on this day. As I was about to enter the screen door in the back of our apartment that led into our bedroom, I looked into the unit and saw someone staring back at me from the other side of the front screen door. I had the doors open between the back and front doors to allow air to circulate around the stuffy apartment, and this gave me a straight path between the front and back screen doors to look through and see this, whatever it was. It looked like a woman in an ill-fitting dress, and she stood at the front door as if she was waiting for me to return and see her. As soon as I did, she turned abruptly and walked towards the front part of the building, passing by the other units on her side. I ran through the house and out the front door, wanting to catch sight of whoever it was that had been peeping in our front door. I saw no one. The neighbor of the next unit, Rachel, had been sitting outside the entire time at her small patio table and hadn't seen anyone pass by. Because of the location of her seat, they would have had to walk right by her to continue in the direction I saw the woman take. This was my encounter with the Mourning lady. I told Rachel what I had seen, and she responded with her own equally chilling story of having had a similar experience in one of the other units when she first moved in and had lived in a smaller one-bedroom on the other side. She would wake at night to feel like someone was watching her, and had a lot of maintenance issues while living there. Not to mention the crying. She said it was more like screaming, really. Screaming that sounded a lot like a baby. Like any good, true, scary story, the real credibility comes with the research. Months after we had moved out of that creepy place, we were hanging out with some friends at a party. Somehow, it was brought up how we had lived in the apartments with Mark. One of my friends, a local to the area, said that she couldn't believe we had lived in that creepy place and asked if we had heard the ghost babies. Ghost babies? I asked, both confused and chilled at the same time. She went on to tell me that the building had been a dentist's office. That much was true. But dentistry wasn't always their only service that was provided. Apparently, the office also did abortions on the down low. As I mentioned, this was a one-stoplight town, and the nearest hospital was several miles away in a neighboring town. There wasn't actually a place in the town to have this sort of procedure performed, and the poor families would get their problems taken care of along with their annual teeth cleaning. This explained a lot. According to my friend and the several people I've asked since that have supported claims of the paranormal happening at this apartment complex, people have often reported hearing a baby cry late at night and early in the morning when there were no children in the building at all. I should mention, at the time we lived there were no babies living in the complex then either. The funeral parlor located directly next door has been claimed by some to have been involved in the disposal of the remains, though that claim has never been proven. The Mourning lady, I have guessed, may be a grieving mother to one of these aborted children. Perhaps she even died during the operation. The most terrifying thing about all of this is that to this day, the reports continue. I believe Mark now. The Karsin Ridge Tragedy. The Karsin Ridge accident refers to an incident that resulted in the death of 9 ski hikers in the northern Ural Mountains. The incident happened on the night of February 2nd, 1959, on the east shoulder of the mountain Kolitsyakal, a Monsey name meaning Mountain of the Dead. The mountain pass where the accident occurred has been named Karsin Ridge after the group's leader, Evan Karsin. The mysterious circumstances of the hikers' deaths have inspired much speculation. Investigations of the deaths suggest that the hikers tore open their tent from within, departing barefoot in heavy snow. While the corpses showed no signs of struggle, one victim had a fractured skull, 2 had broken ribs, and 1 was missing her tongue. The victim's clothing contained high levels of radiation. Soviet investigators determined only that a compelling unknown force had caused the deaths, barring entry to the area for years thereafter. The causes of the accident remain unclear. It had been agreed beforehand that Karsin would send a telegraph to their sports club as soon as the group returned to Vizhai. It was expected that this would happen no later than February 12th. But when this date had passed and no messages had been received, there was no reaction. Delays of a few days were common in such expeditions. Only after the relatives of the travelers demanded a rescue operation did the head of the institute send the first rescue groups, consisting of volunteer students and teachers, on February 20th. Later, the army and police forces became involved, with planes and helicopters being ordered to join the rescue operation. On February 26th, the searchers found the abandoned camp on Kolitsyakal. The tent was badly damaged. A chain of footsteps could be followed, leading down towards the edge of nearby woods. On the opposite side of the pass, 1.5 kilometers northeast, but after 500 meters, they were covered with snow. At the forest edge, under a large old pine, the searchers found the remains of fire, along with the first 2 dead bodies, those of Leo Varnin and Mikhail Artemov, shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. Between the pine and the camp, the searchers found 3 more corpses: Evan Karsin, Sasha Yelena, and Anton Lebedev, who seemed to have died in poses suggesting that they were attempting to return to the camp. They were found separately at distances of 300, 480, and 630 meters from Pine Tree. Searching for the remaining 4 travelers took more than 2 months. They were finally found on May 4th, under 4 meters of snow, in a stream valley further into the woods from the Pine Tree. An examination of the 4 bodies which were found in May changed the picture. 3 of them had fatal injuries. The body of Nikolai Fedorov had major skull damage, and both Irina Sokolova and Dmitry Malenkov had major chest fractures. The force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high, with one expert comparing it to the force of car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds, as if they were crippled by a high level of pressure. One woman was found to be missing her tongue. There had initially been some speculation that the indigenous Monsey people may have attacked and murdered the group for encroaching upon their lands. But investigation indicated that the nature of their deaths did not support this thesis. The hikers' footprints alone were visible, and they showed no sign of hand-to-hand struggle. There was evidence that the team was forced to leave the camp during the night, as they were sleeping. Though the temperature was very low, around minus 25 degrees to minus 30 degrees Celsius, with a storm blowing, the dead were dressed only partially, and certainly inadequately for the conditions. Some of them had only one shoe, while others had no shoes or wore only socks. Some were found wrapped in snips of ripped clothes, which seemed to be cut from those who were already dead. Journalists reporting on the available parts of the inquest files claim that it states 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 of fatal injuries. There were no indications of other people nearby apart from the 9 travelers on Kolitsyakal. nor anyone in the surrounding areas. The tent had been ripped open from within. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. Traces from the camp showed that all group members, including those who were found injured, left the camp of their own accord by foot. One doctor investigating the case suggested that the fatal injuries of the 3 bodies could not have been caused by another human being, owing to the extreme force to which they had been subjected. Forensic radiation tests had shown high doses of radioactive contamination on the clothes of a few victims. The final verdict was that the group members all died because of an unknown compelling force. The inquest ceased officially in May 1959 due to the absence of a guilty party. The files were sent to a secret archive, and the photocopies of the case became available only in the 1990s, with some parts missing. Some researchers point out the following facts which were missed, perhaps ignored by officials. After the funerals, relatives of the deceased claimed that the skin of the victims had a strange orange tan. A former investigating officer said, in a private interview, that his dosimeter had shown a high radiation level on cholecystine, and that this was the reason for the radiation found on the bodies. However, the source of the contamination was not found. Another group of hikers, about 50 kilometers south of the accident, reported that they saw strange orange spheres in the night sky to the north, likely the direction of cholecystine, at the same date as the accident happened. Similar spheres were observed in Ivdal and adjacent areas continually during the period of February to March 1959 by various independent witnesses, including the Meteorology Service and the military. Some reconstructions of the victims' behavior suggest that they were blinded. The rescue team had seen that the victims broke damp and thick pine branches for the fire, even though there was good dry brushwood around. Some reports suggested that much scrap metal was located in the area, leading to speculation that the military had utilized the area secretly and might be engaged in a cover-up. The hanging wires. I could say I was having a pretty peaceful life. I had just graduated high school and was about to enter college in a week, which my mom was really proud of because I decided to pursue something great for my life instead of just applying for McDonald's or something. Anyway, everything was going along pretty normal until one day I overheard my mom talking to someone through the phone. "Who was that, Mom?" I asked because she looked sorry for something, like a friend had a problem and she was feeling bad for her. "Oh, just her old neighbor. Remember that house we lived in many years back? She said the family that moved in after us just left yesterday." My brows furrowed. I couldn't recall living in a house other than this one. Then my mom, Carla, softly laughed and patted my back. "You probably don't remember because you were too little." "Really? Why did we move away?" "We moved because of you. Honey," she chuckled as she waved it off with her hand. "You kept on bugging me about some monsters or whatever. To be honest, we wouldn't have left there if your aunt didn't offer this house for only half the price. A lot cheaper. And you kept on complaining back there anyway, so I just agreed to move." I nodded in understanding, though I still couldn't recall what she was saying. Eventually, I let it go and continued with my business, making sure my papers were complete, packing my stuff that I'd surely need, the usual things to prepare before moving away and entering a new part of your life. The next day, I guess you could say boredom and curiosity just attacked me out of nowhere, and the idea of visiting that old house crossed my mind. I asked my mom, and I was actually surprised when I found out it was just a 15-minute drive away. You guessed it right, I did go to the house. As soon as I stood there in front of the empty driveway, the memories started flooding back like a light switch was flipped open. And I did remember the little me complaining about something almost every day during breakfast, but I just laughed it off, thinking that it was probably just my wild imagination as a kid. I carefully approached the door, just in case someone was still in there, even though Mom said the family moved out and the house was probably empty by now. I tried to open the door, not really expecting it to be unlocked, so I was surprised when it did open. Maybe I was just lucky, yeah. Anyway, the house still had a lot of furniture around, and I actually remember myself doing childish stuff on them, like jumping on the sofa or scribbling on the cabinets. I could only chuckle as the memories flashed by my eyes like I was watching a movie. Eventually, I found my way to my old room. My small bed was still there in a corner, like all these years it had never been moved. The tiny, amused smile on my face faded away as I started to remember what I was always fussing about while we still lived there. I kept on complaining about a monster under my bed. Every night before I'd sleep, Mom would check and assure me that nothing was under there. But as soon as the lights were off and she was gone, I'd start to feel those long, slow scratches right against the wood under my bed. I could even feel it vibrating through the mattress and the thick blanket I wrapped myself in, shivering in fear. Eventually, I'd fall asleep despite the incredible terror and wake up the next morning crying. As I stood there at the doorway, a new surge of curiosity flowed right through me. I don't know why. That monster under the bed was probably just the usual stuff kids tend to imagine, but I wanted to fulfill this silly curiosity. So why not? I walked closer to the bed and took deep breaths. For some reason, being near it sent an eerie sensation up my back, but I tried to shake it away. With one heave, I lifted the whole bed and propped it against the wall. I was ready to laugh at myself for doing that for nothing. But horror washed all that away when I saw long, deep scratches against the wood. There were just so many, to the point that some parts of the wood were already too thin and could break with just a single poke. I couldn't believe it. Gasping, I scrambled out of the room and out of the house. I was about to enter my car when an elderly woman from next door called out to me. "May I help you?" she said with narrowed eyes. Darn. She probably thought I was stealing something from the house. Wiping the sweat off my face, I awkwardly approached her. I used to live here. I was just checking out what's new. I half expected that she wouldn't believe me, but then her eyes widened, as if she recognized me. "Oh, are you that little Superman kid?" She made awkward little gestures that looked like dancing. The one that always danced like this in the backyard. It was funny how the embarrassment was able to wash away the horror in a blink. "Yeah, I remember that." "Why, yeah. Oh my gosh, you've grown so much," she said, all teary-eyed, and hugged me tight. She started mumbling things about how she and Mom were friends and used to come over a lot. Only when she mentioned a phone call did I realize she was the one Mom was talking to yesterday. "Did you decide to visit because I called yesterday?" I glanced at the house. But this time, fear crept inside my heart instead of nostalgia. "Yes, sort of. You said the family just moved out of here." "Yeah, they were such a nice family," she said sadly as she followed my gaze. "Too bad they had to move away." "Why did they move away?" "Quite silly, actually." She chuckled, but the sorry look remained on her face. "But I guess they're just ready to do anything for their kids." The mom told me that their youngest daughter wouldn't stop whining over something for months. It stressed the parents so much, and even their older daughter. They had to endure the little one's whining, but then I guess they eventually got tired of it and decided to move away. The same eerie feeling started to crawl up my spine once again, but I pushed on my curiosity and asked another question. But boy, little did I know that I'd only regret that I ever asked that. What was the girl whining about? The older woman, Mrs. Henderson, paused for a bit, as if to try to remember, but quickly returned her attention to me with a smile. "You know, just some usual children stuff. Someone scratching under her bed or something." The Echo on the Hill. When Emily was about 15, she lived with our mother, Karen, in the northwest province of South Africa. It's a bushveld area, which means lots of thorn trees, long yellow grass, very few neighbors, and silence. They lived in an old farmhouse on the very top of a hill in the middle of several farms. In South Africa, we call a hill a kopje. It was like an island in a sea of rolling yellow waves. And it could get pretty lonely and quiet up there. If you stood outside and screamed bloody murder, there would be no one close enough to hear you. Emily, being a difficult teenager, refused to go to public school. She preferred to live with Karen on their kopje in the middle of nowhere and be homeschooled. Weeks would go by without them seeing another soul. Certainly not a life I could live, which was why I was back in the city with Martin at a public school. As if the isolation and silence weren't enough, strange things would happen in that house. Every now and then, the stereo and lights would turn on or off by themselves. Doors would open and close. Outside lights would burst for no reason at all. And most people who would come to visit and stay the night often had bizarre nightmares. I know I did. But despite all this, the two of them loved living in their strange old house on the copy. Karen had 2 dogs, Shadow, named after Professor Lupin in Harry Potter, an Irish wolfhound, and Baxter, a border collie. Every afternoon, Karen would take them for a long walk down the dusty farm roads and come back just as the sun was setting. Emily would often go with her on the daily dog walk, but this day she stayed behind, caught up in her studies. Karen and the dogs had been gone for about an hour, so Emily was expecting them back any minute. Sure enough, from her seat in front of her desk in the study, she heard Karen calling to Shadow as they came through the front gate, and then the gate shutting behind them. Shortly after that, she heard Karen's heavy hiking boots walking across the slate tiles toward the front door. Emily got up from her seat to go greet them. As she stepped into the hallway, Baxter came rushing past her, almost tripping her. Baxter ran down the hallway and into Karen's bedroom at the end of it, and Emily continued through the lounge to the front door to say hi to Karen. When she got to the front door, it was closed and locked. A bit confused, she went to the back door through the kitchen. It too was closed and locked. Perplexed, Emily went back down the hallway, checking the study, her bedroom, and the bathroom. Still nothing. Finally, she went to Karen's bedroom, where she knew Baxter had to be. She had seen him run in there. She had felt him brush past her legs. The silly dog had almost tripped her. The room was empty and silent, just like the rest of the house. There were only 2 ways in and out of that house, the front and the back door. Both doors were closed and locked, and every window in the house had security bars, so there was no way of getting in or out through a window. Clearly, she was absolutely alone in the house. Emily says that it was at this point that she started panicking a bit. She unlocked the front door and went outside. She walked right around the house, checked the garden shed, went out the front gate, and walked down the road a bit, all the while calling to Karen and the dogs. Nothing. She was alone. 30 minutes later, Karen and the dogs arrived home from their walk, to find Emily sitting on the front step, white as a sheet, clinging to the poor cat like her life depended on it. Who knows why such a thing would happen? Maybe all the silence had made Emily a bit prone to fantasies, though she swears high and low that she didn't imagine it, and that nothing like it ever happened again. All I know for sure is that when I was staying with them on holidays, I refused to ever be left alone on that hill. The Echo Chamber. I got a message in my inbox a few weeks ago. I run a paranormal side blog on Tumblr, but it is a small one. I barely have a following. It is mostly just the friends I have who happen to care about that sort of stuff. It isn't many. When I got the message, I actually asked if one of them had sent it. It felt like it was probably a prank. I don't get many any submissions to my blog. I'm just too small time, and I don't advertise, plus I just reblog other people like Sixpence C and Fuck You Nightmares instead of making any original posts. To tell the truth, I've been contemplating closing it, and only haven't because it's been a convenient archive for the creepy posts I like, but know most of the people who follow my main blog don't care about. Anyway, the message read, "Do you know about that Tumblr that posts an odd audio file once a week? It only does it after erasing the previous week's file, so there is only ever one audio file on it at a time. Someone posted the link to it on the paranormal forum I frequent, and I bookmarked it. I've been listening to the new files every week. People on the forum said the language is usually Japanese, but despite knowing the language, the files don't always make sense to me. Sometimes they do, but more often they're very distorted and odd. I can't put my finger on exactly why sometimes. Other times it is very obvious. The most recent file is both. The beginning seems to mean something along the lines of a prayer, and then fades into babbling, but the audio feels wrong somehow. Then it gets progressively louder until it is deafening before easing back out into its odd, quiet statement of nonsense. I went to the forum to discuss this week's file only to find the thread had been deleted. Only a few of us were left talking about it. Most people had lost interest or left the forum, so there just were not that many posters. I thought the thread was deleted for inactivity, but when I tried to start a new thread, it was closed immediately. I don't know why. I want to think it is because maybe the mods just got fed up with us. No one had any conclusive theories after all, and the thread was pretty dry by the point of it being closed, so maybe they just anticipated it would be the same in a new thread. That is what the rational part of me is thinking. I did try to contact the mods, but I haven't gotten a response. I tried to contact some of the other people I've been talking with, but they didn't respond to me either, and I'm starting to realize a lot of them, formerly very active contributors, haven't been active for weeks now. The less rational part of me is starting to feel kind of alone and nervous. I'm the only person still active on the forums who got into it this much. It seems like I can't talk to anyone about it all in real life. No one would be interested. It feels like I've been left alone in a room with something volatile and curious with no one to tell me what to do with it. I don't know if I can stop poking at it, and I don't know what it might do. So I thought I'd tell more people because probably the sinister part of this is all in my mind, and someone else will figure out. I mean, if it is a code like we're theorizing, or if it's just some weird viral marketing thing or something. It's probably benign after all. It was submitted as a link which went to the Tumblr it is talking about. After my friends swore up and down they hadn't submitted me anything I tried Googling the post. I thought it was probably a sort of creepypasta spam. I guess it had probably been sent to a lot of people, including the bigger horror Tumblrs, but in the end, I came up empty. Googling parts of the message in quotations like this on Google brought up nothing. Googling the URL included brought up no one talking about it. Googling just the username portion of the Tumblr URL brought up a lot of results, but it seems like the name is pretty common, so that was just another dead end. I tried to look for the forum reference in the message, but without any real info on what it was I couldn't find it. I should probably mention I had visited the URL the message linked to. When I first got the message, even thinking it was a friend prank, I was curious enough to check it out. I listened to it and closed it, pretty annoyed that I'd had headphones on when the sound picked up. The message had warned me about that though, so it was my own fault. On a whim, I ended up going back and downloading the file to see if maybe the metadata said anything about the author, and maybe prove it was someone I know playing a long game, but there was nothing there. Someone had wiped it clean. Here is the file uploaded to Vocaroo if you want to check. http://vocaroo.com/i/s1 or wc5nif. My blog is tiny. Even if I published it, no one would see it, so I didn't really think of doing that. I left it for a while and eventually forgot about it. But then today, a new audio post from the blog showed up on my dashboard. I'm sure most people are familiar with how Tumblr works. You don't see someone's post on your dash unless someone you follow reblogs it. You're following the poster, or Tumblr promotes it on your dash, in which case there will be an icon/words on the post saying it is promoted content. This was none of those things. The post showed up on my dash/ as if I was following that blog/. I did not hit follow that time I visited. I even checked the list of people I follow, and that blog is not on it. But somehow a post from it ended up on my dash. I hit play. This one was short. It consisted of one word. The sound quality was weird. It sounded like English, but also could be a similar word in French. I had thought all the messages were supposed to be in Japanese, and was somehow startled. I'm from Quebec and speak both English and French. Why would it suddenly be in a language I could understand? I went to the blog, and sure enough, this was the only post, just like the message said. I tried to shake it off, but why was it on my dash? In a language I know? I didn't bother asking my friend about it. The person I had most suspected before is camping this week and has no internet access. Sure, it could be a queued post, but how the hell would it get onto my dash? And if it was a queued post, why would the previous post have been deleted? I also don't know what to do with it. No one reads my blog. I feel like something is really going on here, but I don't think I can figure it out by myself. I tried emailing the person who sent me this message for the millionth time, but I've gotten no response. So I decided to share it here. I mean, it is probably nothing though. I mean, if it is a code like we were theorizing, or if it's just some weird viral marketing thing or something. It's probably benign after all. RileyCross.tumblr.com. The basement whispers. The basement. Gray. Concrete. Plain. Nothing special about the room at all. And yet, lit by bare fluorescent bulbs hanging in an aluminum fixture, it wasn't a particularly shadowy place. And yet, shadows seemed to loom just out of the corner of the eye. No matter how often the bulbs were changed, they flickered. The landlord would be called, he'd show up in his battered old work truck. He'd change out the bulbs, he'd leave. Before he would go, he would test the lights. When he was there, they'd never flicker. Nothing had really changed in the basement since they moved in. It was stark, nearly empty. Unoccupied metal shelves lined two walls. The stairwell down occupied another. And an old Kenmore washer and dryer from the early 80s stood watch over the fourth wall. Beneath the stairs, the central heat blower, furnace, and exchange. Next to the dingy aluminum and steel of the climate control, there were only cobwebs. And shadow. Year-round, the house was cold. When they first took residence in the old 50s ranch style, it was winter. The weather was a convenient and comfortable scapegoat for the chill in the air. But then came summer. They never ran the window unit air conditioners. Scapegoats became less comfortable and convenient. The basement was, of course, the coldest room in the house year-round. Once in January, the water line to the washer actually froze, and the landlord had to replace more than the overhead light. There was no flood damage, since a large rectangular drain occupied the downward sloping center of the basement floor. That, and the tenants kept nothing in the basement to be damaged. The sounds of water dripping always seemed to come from that steel grate. It was dark, rusty, stained. Thick, almost like the sewer grates in a street. Drip, drip, no matter the weather, no matter the time of year. Drip. Her bedroom had an extra air exchange. Floor level, decorative cast iron. The headboard of her bed hid it. If it had been exposed, her frequent guests would have seen that it was painted white and flaking. Hers was always the coldest bedroom, and she could sometimes hear the drips from the basement, like whispers in her pillow. The first 90 days passed uneventfully for the group of friends in that affordable, if a bit rundown looking, 3-bedroom. They were each single, dating, vibrant, and living the lives of young adults in a city filled with adult playgrounds. On day 91, she lost her keys. They were found sitting on top of the washing machine. It was laughed off, rarely discussed. On day 95, the prude of the house came to knock on her bedroom door at 3:30 a.m. "Lena, hold it down, will you? I'm tired of hearing you F-U-C-K." She yelled from the hallway. Confused, Lena opened the door groggily. "I'm alone, Mara. What the hell are you talking about?" "What? I heard you moaning and banging around in here like you usually do, but louder than usual," Mara said. "No, baby. Nope. I'm sleeping alone. Go back to bed. You were dreaming." Mara went back to bed, but she didn't dream or sleep for the rest of the night. Her favorite roommate was Damien. He dated a series of drag queens, so his overnight company was as varied as it was interesting. Shortly after moving in, his wicked sense of humor had him slipping index cards under Lena's door whenever she was particularly vocal during her frequent nighttime aerobics. He'd rate her verbal performance in accordance with how well he perceived her partner was doing, on a scale of 1 to 10. Sometimes, she'd see the cards slipping in under her door, and others she wouldn't find until a restroom break. Damien made a game of it, often sharing the fun with some of his special friends. There were quite a few nights when Damien would overnight elsewhere, and Lena would have the house alone, or just she and the prude would be home. It was one of those nights where she was solo 124 days after moving in that she brought home a drummer. She was dancing to his rhythm when movement caught her eye. An index card slid beneath the door. She just smiled, thinking Damien was up to his tricks. It wasn't until day 125 that she learned Damien and Mara had both been out of town that night and hadn't been at home at all. On day 202, Lena heard what she swore was the bouncing of a basketball and a child's laughter from the vent behind her headboard. She chose to ignore it, roll over, and go back to sleep. On a trip to the restroom later that same night, she thought she heard the sound of a music box. Damien loses his keys. Lena can't find a remote control to her DVD player, and Mara's watch goes missing. They are all found sitting on the bottom step of the basement on the 221st day of residence. Mara's Timex had a face that showed AM and PM. It was stuck at 3 a.m., and after she replaced the battery twice, it continued to stop at 3 a.m. before she replaced the watch entirely. Day 279. Smells began. They ranged from summertime dumpster behind a Chinese buffet to clogged toilets in a busy gas station. They were daily, unpredictable, and lasted seconds, just a waft to minutes as many as 45. The smells seemed to emanate from and be concentrated in the basement, but they could be detected in every room in the house. The landlord finds no animals during his inspection of the entire property. Day 295. Everyone in the house began using a laundromat. Trips to the basement stop. Drip, drip. Day 326. Lena had no quarters, was home alone, and out of clean clothes. She reluctantly descended to do laundry, calling a friend on the cell phone to chat away the clammy palms and cold sweat. No unusual events occurred during her first trip to the basement. While switching clothes from the wash to the dryer, conversation stopped. Lena screamed, and the phone was dropped. A child's laughter and the sounds of a music box were clearly heard by her friend on the line. A dirty, soot-blackened basketball didn't roll out from the shadows beneath the stairs to hit her on the backs of the legs. It bounced. Echoes of the ravine. They came from the east, Marcus said. A pot of malt ersatz coffee stood steaming on the table between us. We both took it black. Fearsome warriors on horseback they were, a fierce barbarian horde, the most lethal mercenary tribe to plunder and pillage Europe for centuries. They fought for the Russian czars against the Poles, you know, and then for the king of Sweden against the Russians. They fought the Turks and the Persians in turn. They fought Napoleon. They fought for anyone who promised them a country of their own. They were the Cossacks, and they were feared by all. I was 23 when they came to our valley, he said. Of course, everything was different then. It was 60 years ago, after all. I looked out the window. The crags of the Dolomite mountains looming over the valley below us, shadowy in the twilight. Their house was perched by the steep edge of the tree line, one of 10 clustered around a small church. Barring indoor plumbing and electricity, time already seemed to have stood still. A city girl meeting her boyfriend's parents for the first time, I had been startled by a sheep peering into the bathroom window that morning. I was one of the only boys left in Leans. At the beginning, all my friends volunteered, and I was eager to fight too, of course. But the army didn't take me because of goiter. Years later, it was different. They were rounding up everyone they could get their hands on, boys of 12, 13. Grandfathers. I would have been drafted except for a tractor accident on my father's farm. I looked at his blunt carpenter's hands folded on the checked tablecloth, and I wondered if his father had been equally capable and practical-minded enough to manufacture a minor glitch in his machinery when called for. The fighting was all but over. The war had really been lost years ago. Now, everyone left alive was fleeing west, trying to outrun the Soviets and reach the Allied zones. American was best, of course, but we all trusted the British too. At the time, what did you know? I wondered and when. What of your neighbors? Did you believe the propaganda in the papers on the radio? Did your priest preach of sacred duty to the fatherland? Did your mayor hang the swastika with pride? Growing up in Austria, you're taught to respect your elders, but whenever I see someone of that generation, I always ask myself, What did you do to survive? Or rather, what did you not? Stalin had it in for the Cossacks, especially. They'd been vicious in battle against the resistance partisans, and they hated the Soviets. It was 1945 when they fled from Yugoslavia. They fought their way through to the British, who put them in an internment camp here on the River Drau. Enemy combatants, you see, prisoners of war who surrendered voluntarily. What do they look like, the men? I asked. Men? There were entire families. Husbands and fathers on horseback with their women and children trundling behind them in carts. Old and young alike. Defeated they were, but proud too. They'd been beaten before and regrouped. And they were safe now, under Churchill. Or so they thought. Yalta, I remembered. The treaty, a betrayal to some. The salvation of Europe to others. Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt. Men with mustaches, waistcoats, and cigars, divvying up a continent with rulers. Most refugees who had fled the East were granted safe haven. The Cossacks, with their democratically elected leaders and their nomadic freedom, were not. They settled in happily enough here, for the most part, made friends with the villagers, helped with the harvest. They were waiting to see where Churchill would resettle them. Perhaps they would have been happy to stay. They certainly didn't bother us. But they were to be sent back to Russia to face execution. Cattle cars came to the train station, this time sent by the British. Soldiers encircled the valley, the internment camp, trying to round them up. We could hear them all the way up the mountain. The screaming. Men, women, horses. Mothers threw their babies into the river to drown and jumped in after them. Men cut their wrists as the soldiers dragged them toward the train tracks, trails of blood wending behind them. And you heard this? I asked. You saw? Yes. Yes. A long silence. We gaze out the window to the mountains beyond, as if listening for echoes. Those they caught were sent to the Soviet Union, where they were shot. The communists executed men, women, and children alike. But some managed to escape deportation. They hid in haylofts, scrambled up cliff faces to abandoned sheep sheds. The mountain farmers helped to shelter them if they could. Did any of you shelter anyone in the years before, I wondered? Other refugees, perhaps the very partisans hunted by the Cossacks and the Nazis? There had been only one Jewish family in the town of Linz before the war, or so I'd read, and not one of them survived. But most of them, Marcus continued, ran away and hid in caves. The British spent months clambering about the mountains, searching for the ones that got away. He chuckled briefly. Those caves, some of them were crevasses, narrow slits between rock faces. Some were no bigger than holes. Tricky to climb into, but even more difficult to get out again. Cossack and Locher, Cossack holes, we call them to this day. When we talk about them at all, he paused. I wished for a cigarette, because some of the holes aren't empty. We had archaeologists here last summer searching for remnants. A medal here, a belt buckle there. But they didn't get very far, didn't climb high enough, or stay the night. Another silence, more tense this time. Do you mean to say there are still bones? I asked. Bones. It's not their bones I worry about, he replied, and crossed himself reflexively. Some nights, when the stars are out and the moon is low, you hear the river screaming. And some nights, even closer, you hear the rocks scream back. He makes eye contact for the first time in what feels like forever. We put you in the guest room. He says, it has a balcony. It's looking to be a lovely, clear night. I dutifully assure him that it is a lovely room. Careful not to mention I've taken down the various crosses and icons hung from the walls, a constant reminder of my status as godless city girl evil influence on beloved son. He grunts assent and, rising from his chair, bids me good night. I'd lock the windows and doors before turning in if I were you. Echoes in the bunk bed. This actually happened to me a few years back at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. My sophomore year, I roomed with a girl named Lena. She was a jazz vocalist, but her main interest was opera. We had a small room on the 6th floor of a dormitory called Juniper Hall. The walls were thin, and her late night singing and voice practices would keep me up late. After a month or so of lost sleep, I convinced her to move her late night practices to the music studios in the Merriam Theater building a block away. Around 8 o'clock one evening, Lena announced that she would be practicing late for an upcoming recital and probably wouldn't be home until around midnight. Great, I thought, that means I can go to bed early. I was beat. I had a horrible day in acting studio and was ready to pass out as soon as I had dinner. She said goodnight and left, coffee and sheet music in hand. I made some grilled cheese and soup, gobbled it down, and immediately began to prepare for bed. By the time I got out of the shower, my eyelids were so heavy I could hardly brush my teeth. I pulled on my PJs and crawled into the top bunk of our bunk bed. I was out as soon as my head hit the pillow. I should take a second to describe the layout of our apartment. When entering the apartment, the bedroom was through a door immediately to the left. Our bathroom was inside the bedroom, just past the bunk beds. Yours is nice in the sense that you don't have to share bathrooms. Anyway, I woke up to the sound of the apartment door closing. I opened my eyes and groggily checked my phone. Midnight on the dot. I rolled back over and closed my eyes. I heard Lena enter the room and stop in front of the bunk bed. Checking to see if I'm actually asleep, I thought. She flopped down on the bed below me, which was strange, as she was a stickler for brushing her teeth and washing up before bed. Then again, exams were just around the corner, and we were all exhausted. The mattress below me creaked and then was silent. I couldn't even hear her breathing. I started to drift off again. I was just on the edge of deep sleep when I was startled awake again by a noise. A key in the lock, the door opening, and Lena entering our apartment, humming an opera tune. The mattress below me creaked.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.